Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepy Time Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. This is a podcast where I read old books, sometimes fiction, sometimes non-fiction, in the most boring way I can, to try help you slow your spinning mind, enough for you to fall asleep in the most natural way possible. The stresses of life often follow us to bed and keep us company, but I'm here to distract you from them and help you to drift away. But before you do fall asleep, if you're finding Sleepy Time Tales helpful and you would like to support me, to help me keep it going out to you and thousands of your fellow insomniacs, please consider supporting on Patreon at patreon.com/sleepytimetales. If monthly is a bit much, you can also put in the tip jar and the coffee. These are both linked in the show notes. Or you can support Sleepy Time Tales by just telling people about it. If you know someone who's struggling to sleep, let them know where to find it and leave it there. Now we're going to pick up back in Mary Shelley's The Last Man, where Raymond is the Lord Protector of England, and things start to go bad in his marriage because he's keeping secrets. So snuggle down, close your eyes, breathe deeply and listen closely as I lead you down the path to sleep. We pick up tonight with The Last Man by Mary Shelly. Having thus finished her tale and given such an account as she deemed fit, of the motives of her abstaining from all endeavour to obtain aid from her countrymen, Evadne paused, yet she seemed to have more to say, to which she was unable to give words. In the meantime, Raymond was eloquent. His desire of restoring his lovely friend to her rank in society, and to her lost prosperity, animated him, and he poured forth with energy all his wishes and intentions on that subject. But he was checked. Evadne exacted a promise that he should conceal from all her friends her existence in England. The relatives of the Earl of Windsor, said she haughtily, doubtless think that I injured him. Perhaps the Earl himself would be the first to acquit me, but probably I do not deserve acquittal. I acted then, as I ever must, from impulse. This abode of penury may at least prove the disinterestedness of my conduct. No matter, I do not wish to plead my cause before any of them, not even before your lordship, had you not first discovered me. The tenor of my actions will prove that I had rather die than be a mark for scorn. Behold the proud Evadne in her tatters. Look on the beggar princess. There is aspic venom in the thought. Promise me that my secret shall not be violated by you. Raymond promised, but then a new discussion ensued. Evadne required another engagement on his part, that he would not without her concurrence enter into any project for her benefit, nor himself offer relief. Do not degrade me in my own eyes, she said. Poverty has long been my nurse. Hard visaged she is, but honest. If dishonour, or what I conceive to be dishonour, come near me, I am lost. Raymond adduced many arguments and fervent persuasions to overcome her feeling, but she remained unconvinced and agitated by the discussion. She wildly and passionately made a solemn vow to fly and hide herself where he never could discover her, where famine would soon bring death to conclude her woes, if he persisted in his, to her, disgracing offers. She could support herself, she said, and then she showed him how. By executing various designs and paintings, she earned a pittance for his support. Raymond yielded for the present. He felt assured that after he had for a while humoured her self-will, that in the end friendship and reason would gain the day. But the feelings that actuated Evadne were rooted in the depths of her being, and were such in their growth as he had no means of understanding. Evadne loved Raymond. He was the hero of her imagination, the image carved by love in the unchanged texture of her heart. 7 years ago, in her youthful prime, she had become attached to him, He had served her country against the Turks. He had in her own land acquired that military glory particularly dear to the Greeks, since they were still obliged inch by inch to fight for their security. Yet when he returned thence and first appeared in public life in England, her love did not purchase his, which then vacillated between Perdita and a crown. While he was yet undecided, she had quitted England. The news of his marriage reached her, and her hopes, poorly nurtured blossoms, withered and fell. The glory of life was gone for her. The roseate halo of love, which had imbued every object with its own colour, faded. She was content to take life as it was, and make the best of leaden-coloured reality. She married, and carrying her restless energy of character with her into new scenes, she turned her thoughts to ambition, and aimed at the title and power of Princess of Wallachia, while her patriotic feelings were soothed by the idea of the good she might do her country, when her husband should be chief of this principality. She lived to find ambition, as unreal a delusion as love. Her intrigues with Russia for the furtherance of her object excited the jealousy of the Porte and the animosity of the Greek government. She was considered a traitor by both. The ruin of her husband followed. They avoided death by a timely flight, and she fell from the height of her desires to penury in England. Much of this tale she concealed from Raymond, nor did she confess that repulse and denial as to a criminal convicted of the worst of crimes, that of bringing the scythe of foreign despotism to cut away the new springing liberties of her country, would have followed her application to any among the Greeks. She knew that she was the cause of her husband's utter ruin, and she strung herself to bear the consequences. The reproaches which agony extorted, or worse, cureless, uncomplaining depression, when his mind was sunk in torpor, not the less pitiful because it was silent and moveless. She reproached herself with the crime of his death. Guilt and its punishments appeared to surround her. In vain she endeavored to allay remorse by the memory of her real integrity. The rest of the world, and she among them, judged of her actions by their consequences. She prayed for her husband's soul. She conjured the Supreme to place on her head the crime of his self-destruction. She vowed to live to expiate his fault. In the midst of such wretchedness as must soon have destroyed her, one thought only was matter of consolation. She lived in the same country, breathed the same air as Raymond. His name as protector was the burthen of every tongue, his achievements, projects, and magnificence the argument of every story. Nothing is so precious to a woman's heart as the glory and excellence of him she loves. Thus, in every horror, Evadne revelled in his fame and prosperity. While her husband lived, this feeling was regarded by her as a crime, repressed, repented of. When he died, the tide of love resumed its ancient flow. It deluged her soul with its tumultuous waves, and she gave herself up as prey to its uncontrollable power. But never, oh never, should he see her in her degraded state. Never should he behold her fallen, as she deemed, from her pride of beauty, the poverty-stricken inhabitant of a garret, with a name which had become a reproach, and a weight of guilt on her soul. But though impenetrably veiled from him, his public offices permitted her to become acquainted with all his actions, his daily course of life, even his conversation. She allowed herself one luxury. She saw the newspapers every day and feasted on the praise and actions of the protector. Not that this indulgence was devoid of accompanying grief. Perdita's name was forever joined with his. Their conjugal felicity was celebrated even by the authentic testimony of facts. They were continually together, nor could the unfortunate Evadne read the monosyllable that designated his name, without, at the same time, being presented with the images of her who was the faithful companion of all his labours and pleasures. They, their excellencies, met her eyes in each line, mingling an evil potion that poisoned her very blood. It was in the newspaper that she saw the advertisement for the design for a national gallery. Combining with taste her remembrance of the edifices which she had seen in the East, and by an effort of genius enduring them with unity of design, she executed the plan which had been sent to the Protector. She triumphed in the idea of bestowing, unknown and forgotten as she was, a benefit upon him she loved. With enthusiastic pride she looked forward to the accomplishment of a work of hers, which, immortalized in stone, would go down to posterity stamped with the name of Raymond. She waited with eagerness the return of her messenger from the palace. She listened insatiate to his account of each word, each look of the Protector. She felt bliss in this communication with her beloved, though he knew not to whom he addressed his instructions. The drawing itself became ineffably dear to her. He had seen it and praised it. It was again retouched by her. Each stroke of a pencil was as a chord of thrilling music, and bore to her the idea of a temple raised to celebrate the deepest and most unutterable emotions of her soul. These contemplations engaged her, when the voice of Raymond first struck her ear, a voice once heard never to be forgotten. She mastered her gush of feelings and welcomed him with quiet gentleness. Pride and tenderness now struggled, and at length made a compromise together. She would see Raymond, since destiny had led him to her, and her constancy and devotion must merit his friendship. But her rights with regard to him and her cherished independence should not be injured by the idea of interest, or the intervention of the complicated feelings attendant on pecuniary obligation, and the relative situations of the benefactor and benefited. Her mind was of uncommon strength. She could subdue her sensible wants to her mental wishes, and suffer cold, hunger, and misery, rather than to concede to fortune a contested point. Alas, that in human nature such a pitch of mental discipline and disdainful negligence of nature itself should not have been allowed to the extreme of moral excellence. But the resolution that permitted her to resist the pains of privation sprung from the too great energy of her passions, and the concentrated self-will of which this was a sign was destined to destroy even the very idle, to preserve whose respect she submitted to this detail of wretchedness. Their intercourse continued. By degrees Evadne related to her friend the whole of her story, the stain her name had received in Greece, the weight of sin which had accrued to her from the death of her husband. When Raymond offered to clear her reputation and demonstrate to the world her real patriotism, she declared that it was only through her present sufferings that she hoped for any relief to the stings of conscience, that in her state of mind, diseased as he might think it, the necessity of occupation was salutary medicine. She ended by extorting a promise that for the space of 1 month he would refrain from the discussion of her interests, engaging after that time to yield in part to his wishes. She could not disguise to herself that any change would separate her from him. Now she saw him each day. His connection with Adrian and Perdita was never mentioned. He was to her a meteor, a companionless star which at its appointed hour rose in her hemisphere, whose appearance brought felicity, and which, although it set, was never eclipsed. He came each day to her abode of penury, and his presence transformed it to a temple redolent with sweets, radiant with heaven's own light. He partook of her delirium. They built a wall between them and the world. Without, 1,000 harpies raved, remorse and misery, expecting the destined moment for their invasion. Within was the peace as of innocence, reckless, blindless, deluding joy, hope, whose still anchor rested on placid but inconstant water. Thus, while Raymond had been wrapped in visions of power and fame, while he looked forward to entire dominion over the elements and the mind of man, the territory of his own heart escaped his notice, and from that unthought-of source arose the mighty torrent that overwhelmed his will, and carried to the oblivious sea fame, hope, and happiness. Chapter 8. In the meantime, what did Perdita? During the first month of his protectorate, Raymond and she had been inseparable. Each project was discussed with her, each plan approved by her. I never beheld anyone so perfectly happy as my sweet sister. Her expressive eyes were two stars whose beams were love. Hope and light-heartedness sat on her cloudless brow. She fed even to tears of joy on the praise and glory of her Lord. Her whole existence was one sacrifice to him, and in the humility of her heart she felt self-complacency. It arose from the reflection that she had won the distinguished hero of the age, and had for years preserved him, even after time had taken from love its usual nourishment. Her own feeling was as entire as at its birth. 5 years had failed to destroy the dazzling unreality of passion. Most men ruthlessly destroy the sacred veil with which the female heart is wont to adorn the idol of its affections. Not so Raymond. He was an enchanter, whose reign was forever undiminished, a king whose power never was suspended. Follow him through the details of common life, still the same charm of grace and majesty adorned him, nor could he be despoiled of the innate deification with which nature had invested him. Perdita grew in beauty and excellence under his eye. I no longer recognized my reserved, abstracted sister in the fascinating and open-hearted wife of Raymond. The genius that enlightened her countenance was now united to an expression of benevolence, which gave divine perfection to her beauty. Happiness is in its highest degree the sister of goodness. Suffering and amiability may exist together, and writers have loved to depict their conjunction. There is a human and touching harmony in the picture. But perfect happiness is an attribute of angels, and those who possess it appear angelic. Fear has been said to be the parent of religion. Even of that religion is it the generator, which leads its votaries to sacrifice human victims at its altars. But the religion which springs from happiness is a lovelier religion, the religion which makes the heart breathe forth fervent thanksgiving and causes us to pour out the overflowings of the soul before the author of our being, that which is the parent of the imagination and the nurse of poetry, that which bestows benevolent intelligence on the invisible mechanism of the world and makes earth a temple with heaven for its cope. Such happiness, goodness, and religion inhabited the mind of Perdita. During the 5 years we had spent together, a knot of happy human beings at Windsor Castle, her blissful lot had been the frequent theme of my sister's conversation. From early habit and natural affection, she selected me in preference to Adrian or Idris, to be the partner in her overflowings of delight. Perhaps, though apparently much unalike, some secret point of resemblance, the offspring of consanguinity, induced this preference. Often at sunset I walked with her, in the sober and shadowed forest paths, and listened with joyful sympathy. Security gave dignity to her passion, the certainty of a full return, left her with no wish unfulfilled. The birth of her daughter, embryo copy of her Raymond, filled up the measure of her content, and produced a sacred and indissoluble tie between them. Sometimes she felt proud that he had preferred her to the hopes of her crown. Sometimes she remembered that she had suffered keen anguish when he hesitated in his choice. But this memory of past discontent only served to enhance her present joy. What had been hardly won was now entirely possessed, doubly dear. She would look at him at a distance with the same rapture, oh, far more exuberant rapture, that one might feel, who after the perils of a tempest should find themselves in the desiring port. She would hasten towards him, to feel more certain in his arms the reality of her bliss. This warmth of affection, added to the depth of her understanding and the brilliancy of her imagination, made her beyond words dear to Raymond. If a feeling of dissatisfaction ever crossed her, it arose from the idea that he was not perfectly happy. Desire of renown and presumptuous ambition had characterized his youth. The one he had acquired in Greece, the other he had sacrificed to love. His intellect found sufficient field for exercise in his domestic circle, whose members, all adorned by refinement and literature, were many of them, like himself, distinguished by genius. Yet active life was the genuine soil for his virtues, and he sometimes suffered tedium from the monotonous succession of events in our retirement. Pride made him recoil from complaint, and gratitude and affection to Perdita generally acted as an opiate to all desire, save that of meriting her love. We all observed the visitation of these feelings, and none regretted them so much as Perdita. Her life consecrated to him was a slight sacrifice to reward his choice, but was not that sufficient? Did he need any gratification that she was unable to bestow? This was the only cloud in the azure of her happiness. His passage to power had been full of pain to both. He, however, attained his wish. He filled the situation for which nature seemed to have moulded him. His activity was fed in wholesome measure, without either exhaustion or satiety. His taste and genius found worthy expression in each of the modes human beings have invented to engage and manifest the spirit of beauty. The goodness of his heart made him never weary of conducing to the well-being of his fellow creatures. His magnificent spirit and aspirations for the respect and love of mankind now received fruition. True, his exaltation was temporary. Perhaps it were better that it should be so. Habit would not dull his sense of the enjoyment of power, nor struggles, disappointment, and defeat await at the end of that which would expire at its maturity. He determined to extract and condense all of glory, power, and achievement, which might have resulted from a long reign, into the 3 years of his protectorate. Raymond was eminently social. All that he now enjoyed would have been devoid of pleasure to him, had it been unparticipated. But in Perdita he possessed all that his heart could desire. Her love gave birth to sympathy. Her intelligence made her understand him at a word. Her powers of intellect enabled her to assist and guide him. He felt her worth. During the early years of their union, the inequality of her temper and yet unsubdued self-will, which tarnished her character, had been a slight drawback to the fullness of his sentiment. Now that unchanged serenity and gentle compliance were added to her other qualifications, his respect equaled his love. Years added to the strictness of their union. They did not now guess at, and totter on the pathway, divining the mode to please, hoping yet fearing the continuance of bliss. 5 years gave a sober certainty to their emotions, though it did not rob them of their ethereal nature. It had given them a child, but it had not detracted from personal attractions of my sister. Timidity, which in her had almost amounted to awkwardness, was exchanged for a graceful decision of manner. Frankness, instead of reserve, characterized her physiognomy, and her voice was attuned to thrilling softness. She was now 23, and the pride of womanhood, fulfilling the precious duties of wife and mother, possessed of all her heart had ever coveted. Raymond was 10 years older. To his previous beauty, noble mien, and commanding aspect, he now added gentlest benevolence, winning tenderness, graceful and unwearied attention to the wishes of another. The first secret that had existed between them was the visits of Raymond to Evadne. He had been struck by the fortitude and beauty of the ill-fated Greek, and when a constant tenderness towards him unfolded itself, he asked with astonishment by what act of his he had merited this passionate and unrequited love. She was for a while the sole object of his reveries, and Perdita became aware that his thoughts and time were bestowed on a subject unparticipated by her. My sister was by nature destitute of the common feelings of anxious, petulant jealousy. The treasure which she possessed in the affections of Raymond was more necessary to her being than the lifeblood that animated her veins, more truly than Othello might say, "To be once in doubt is once to be resolved." On the present occasion she did not suspect any alienation of affection, but she conjectured that some circumstance connected with his high place had occasioned this mystery. She was startled and pained. She began to count the long days and months and years which must elapse before he would be restored to a private station and unreservedly to her. She was not content that, even for a time, he should practice concealment with her. She often repined, but her trust in the singleness of his affection was undisturbed, and when they were together, unchecked by fear, she opened her heart to the fullest delight. Time went on. Raymond, stopping midway in his wild career, paused suddenly to think of consequences. Two results presented themselves in the view he took of the future: that his intercourse with Evadne should continue a secret too, or that finally it should be discovered by Perdita. The destitute condition and highly wrought feelings of his friend prevented him from advertising to the possibility of exiling himself from her. In the first event he had bidden an eternal farewell to open-hearted converse and entire sympathy with the companion of his life. The veil must be thicker than that invented by Turkish jealousy, the wall higher than the unscalable tower of Vathek, which should conceal from her the workings of his heart, hide from her view the secret of his actions. This idea was intolerably painful to him. Frankness and social feelings were the essence of Raymond's nature. Without them his qualities became commonplace. Without these to spread glory over his intercourse with Perdita, his vaunted exchange of a throne for her love was as weak and empty as the rainbow hues which vanish when the sun is down. But there was no remedy. Genius, devotion, and courage, the adornments of his mind, and the energies of his soul, all exerted to their uttermost stretch, could not roll back one hair's breadth the wheel of time's chariot. That which had been was written with the adamantine pen of reality on the everlasting volume of the past, nor could agony and tears suffice to wash out one iota from the act fulfilled. But this was the best side of the question. What if circumstance should lead Perdita to suspect, and suspecting to be resolved? The fibers of his frame became relaxed, and cold dew stood on his forehead at this idea. Men may scoff at his dread, but he read the future, and the peace of Perdita was too dear to him, her speechless agony too certain and too fearful not to unman him. His course was speedily decided upon. If the worst befell, if she learnt the truth, he would neither stand her reproaches nor the anguish of her altered looks. He would forsake her, England, his friends, the scenes of his youth, the hopes of coming time. He would seek another country, and in other scenes begin life again. Having resolved on this, he became calmer. He endeavored to guide with prudence the steeds of destiny through the devious road which he had chosen, and bent all his efforts the better to conceal what he could not alter. The perfect confidence that subsisted between Perdita and him rendered every communication common between them. They opened each other's letters, even as, until now, The inmost fold of the heart of each was disclosed to the other. A letter came unawares. Perdita read it. Had it contained confirmation, she must have been annihilated. As it was, trembling, cold and pale, she sought Raymond. He was alone, examining some petitions lately presented. She entered silently, sat on a sofa opposite to him, and gazed on him with a look of such despair that wildest shrieks and dire moans would have been tame exhibitions of misery compared to the living incarnation of the thing exhibited by her. At first he did not take his eyes from the papers. When he raised them, he was struck by the wretchedness manifest on her altered cheeks. For a moment he forgot his own acts and fears, and asked with consternation, "Dearest girl, what is the matter? What has happened?" "Nothing," she replied at first, "and yet not so," she continued, hurrying on in her speech. "You have secrets, Raymond. Where have you been lately? Whom have you seen? What do you conceal from me? Why am I banished from your confidence? Yet this is not it. I do not intend to entrap you with questions. One will suffice. Am I completely a wretch?" With trembling hand she gave him the paper, and sat white and motionless, looking at him while he read it. He recognized the handwriting of Evadne, and the color mounted in his cheeks. With lightning speed he conceived the contents of the letter. All was now cast on one die. Falsehood and artifice were trifles in comparison with the impending ruin. He could either entirely dispel Perdita's suspicions or quit her forever. "My dear girl," he said, "I have been to blame, but you must pardon me. I was in the wrong to commence a system of concealment, but I did it for the sake of sparing you pain, and each day has rendered it more difficult for me to alter my plan. Besides, I was instigated by delicacy towards the unhappy writer of these few lines." Perdita gasped. "Well," she cried, "go on." "That is all. This paper tells all. I am placed in the most difficult circumstances. I have done my best, though perhaps I have done wrong. My love for you is inviolate." Perdita shook her head doubtingly. "It cannot be," she cried. "I know that it is not. You would deceive me, but I will not be deceived. I have lost you, myself, my life." "Do you not believe me?" said Raymond haughtily. "To believe you," she exclaimed, "I would give up all and expire with joy, so that in death I could feel that you were true. But that cannot be." "Perdita," continued Raymond, "do you not see the precipice on which you stand? You may believe that I did not enter on my present line of conduct without reluctance and pain. I knew that it was possible that your suspicions might be excited, but I trusted that my simple word would cause them to disappear. I built my hope on your confidence. Do you think that I will be questioned and my replies disdainfully set aside? Do you think that I will be suspected, perhaps watched, cross-questioned and disbelieved? I am not yet fallen so low. My honor is not yet so tarnished. You have loved me. I adored you. But all human sentiments come to an end. Let our affection expire, but let it not be exchanged for distrust and recrimination. Heretofore we have been friends, lovers. Let us not become enemies, mutual spies. I cannot live the object of suspicion. You cannot believe me. Let us part." "Exactly so," cried Perdita. "I knew that it would come to this. Are we not already parted? Does not a stream, boundless as ocean, deep as a vacuum, yawn between us?" Raymond rose. His voice was broken, his features convulsed, his manner calm as the earthquake-cradling atmosphere. He replied, "I am rejoiced that you take my decision so philosophically. Doubtless you will play the part of the injured wife to admiration. Sometimes you may be stung with the feeling that you have wronged me, but the condolence of your relatives, the pity of the world, The complacency with which the consciousness of your own immaculate innocence will bestow will be excellent balm. Me you will never see more. Raymond moved towards the door. He forgot that each word he spoke was false. He personated his assumption of innocence even to self-deception. Have not actors wept as they portrayed imagined passion? A more intense feeling of the reality of fiction possessed Raymond. He spoke with pride. He felt injured. Perdita looked up. She saw his angry glance. His hand was on the lock of the door. She started up. She threw herself on his neck. She gasped and sobbed. He took her hand and, leading her to the sofa, he sat down near her. Her head fell on his shoulder. She trembled. Alternate changes of fire and ice ran through her limbs. Observing her emotion, he spoke with softened accent. The blow is given. I will not part from you in anger. I owe you too much. I owe you 6 years of unalloyed happiness, but they're past. I will not live the mark of suspicion, the object of jealousy. I love you too well. In an eternal separation, only can either of us hope for dignity and propriety of action. We shall not then be degraded from our true characters. Faith and devotion have hitherto been the essence of our intercourse. These lost, let us not cling to the seedless husk of life, the unkerneled shell. You have your child, your brother, Idris, Adrian. And you, cried Perdita, the writer of that letter. Uncontrollable indignation flashed from the eyes of Raymond. He knew that this accusation at least was false. Entertain this belief, he cried. Hug it to your heart. Make it a pillow to your head, an opiate for your eyes. I am content. But by the God that made me, hell is not more false than the word you have spoken. Perdita was struck by the impassioned seriousness of his asseverations. She replied with earnestness, I do not refuse to believe you, Raymond. On the contrary, I promise to put implicit faith in your simple word. Only assure me that your love and faith towards me have never been violated, and suspicion and doubt and jealousy will at once be dispersed. We shall continue as we have ever done, one heart, one hope, one life. I have already assured you of my fidelity, said Raymond, with disdainful coldness. Triple assertions will avail nothing where one is despised. I will say no more, for I can add nothing to what I have already said, to what you before contemptuously set aside. This contention is unworthy of both of us, and I confess that I am weary of replying to charges at once unfounded and unkind. Perdita tried to read his countenance, which he angrily averted. There was so much of truth and nature in his resentment that her doubts were dispelled. Her countenance, which for years had not expressed a feeling unallied to affection, became again radiant and satisfied. She found it, however, no easy task to soften and reconcile Raymond. At first he refused to stay to hear her. But she would not be put off. Secure of his unaltered love, she was willing to undertake any labor, use any entreaty to dispel his anger. She obtained a hearing. He sat in haughty silence, but he listened. She first assured him of her boundless confidence. Of this he must be conscious, since but for that she would not seek to detain him. She enumerated their years of happiness. She brought before him past scenes of intimacy and happiness. She pictured their future life. She mentioned their child. Tears unbidden now filled her eyes. She tried to disperse them, but they refused to be checked. Her utterance was choked. She had not wept before. Raymond could not resist these signs of distress. He felt perhaps somewhat ashamed of the part he acted of the injured man, he who was in truth the injurer. And then he devoutly loved Perdita. The bend of her head, her glossy ringlets, the turn of her form were to him subjects of deep tenderness and admiration. As she spoke, her melodious tones entered his soul. He soon softened towards her, comforting and caressing her, and endeavoring to cheat himself into the belief that he had never wronged her. And on that slightly strange note, I'm going to call it a night. As always, if you want to pick up the original, you can find it on Project Gutenberg at the link in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepy Time Tales, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to follow or subscribe in whatever service you use so that you get your new episodes whenever they come out. Good night, and sweet dreams.